The Arizona plains in 1875 stretched like a vast, untamed wilderness of brittle grass and sun-bleached earth, a desolate expanse near Willow Creek, where the dry wind kicked up dust clouds that stung the eyes and never ceased, its ceaseless murmur weaving tales of survival, loss, and resilience amid the prairie frontier. Willow Creek, a remote ranch perched on the edge of this harsh terrain, stood weathered under a stormy sky, still clinging to the afternoon's heat, its wooden fences sagging under years of neglect, its barren yard whispering of a solitude long endured. Caleb Stone rode slowly toward the property, his horse breathing heavily beneath him, each hoofstep leaving a faint imprint in the cracked earth, the weight of a long day's labor pressing on his 42-year-old frame. His face, rugged with a weathered jaw and a dusting of gray at his temples, was framed by a battered hat, his shoulders bowed under the grief of burying his wife 4 years past beneath a lone mesquite tree that leaned toward the dry creek like a broken sentinel. Since then, he had lived in silence, not by choice but necessity, the ranch bearing the shape of her memory. Her woven scarf still hung on a peg he never touched, a shelf of dried herbs gathering dust, the bedroll cold without her warmth. A daughter, lost to a fever, had stopped him from dreaming of family. Instead, he tended cattle, mended fences, and kept to himself. The town whispered of the quiet rancher who rarely spoke, some calling him hardened by loss, others saying he'd always been that way. He'd been out since dawn, repairing a breached fence line after a storm had ravaged the creek 2 nights prior, the thunderous skies having scattered his herd. His back ached with the effort, a persistent reminder of years in the saddle, and the solitude of the prairie had become a refuge from a world that had taken everything. As he approached the ranch's boundary, a faint sound broke the stillness, not the rustle of wind or the call of a hawk, but a child's voice, small and trembling, cutting through the dust. His head snapped up, scanning the horizon, squinting against the glare. Movement caught his eye. 2 figures near the corral, one a young girl holding another smaller child, their forms shadowed by the fading light. Instinct surged through him, a rare break in his calm. Without thought, he spurred his horse forward, the animal's hooves pounding the earth as he dismounted with a grunt, his rifle in hand. The older girl, no more than 14, stepped forward, her deerskin dress torn and stained, her dark hair tangled with dust, her eyes wide with desperation. The younger child, a boy of 2, clung to her, his small face buried in her shoulder, his whimpers filling the air. "Can you take her instead of me?" the girl asked, her voice breaking, her hands trembling as she held out the boy. Caleb froze, his breath catching, the weight of her words sinking into his chest like a bullet. He said nothing, his jaw tightening, his hands steadying the rifle as he studied them. The girl's face was streaked with tears and dirt, her wrists marked with faint rope burns, her posture defiant yet fragile. The boy, Quay, shivered, his tattered blanket slipping from his shoulders, his pale face a mirror of exhaustion. Caleb's mind raced. Why would she offer such a sacrifice? Who had brought them here? The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken pain, until he stepped forward, lowering his rifle. He took the boy gently, cradling him in one arm, then extended his other hand to the girl. She hesitated, her eyes searching his, then took it. Her grip firm despite her fear. "Both of you," he said finally, his voice low and rough, breaking his usual silence. "I won't leave either behind." The girl blinked, a tear sliding down her cheek, and nodded faintly. He later learned her name was Isla, the boy's mother Nia, both Apache, their presence a mystery he was yet to unravel. He led them to the ranch house, its door creaking as he pushed it open, the interior dim and dusty, the hearth cold and empty. Inside, he laid them on a cot, covering them with every blanket he owned, removing Isla's torn moccasins to check for wounds. Her ankle was swollen but not broken, and he hesitated at her dress, draping his wool coat over her shoulders before turning to light the fire. Quay clung to Nia, his small face pressed against her chest, his breathing shallow but steady. Kneeling by the cold hearth, he struck a match, his hand still trembling, the flame catching slowly on the dry wood. Once it took, he stood and met their gazes. They watched him, silently, their eyes a mix of gratitude and wariness. "You're safe here," he said, his voice low and even. "I won't hurt you." Ayla nodded faintly, and he pulled a chair to the far corner, sitting to guard them through the night, his jaw tight with the uncertainty of what he'd taken on. The storm outside raged, its thunder a backdrop to the quiet within. By dawn, the fire crackled steadily, its orange glow brushing the cot where Isla and Quay lay. Their breathing steadied, color returning to their faces. Caleb hadn't slept, remaining in the chair, his damp shirt and aching back a testament to the night's tension. Quay stirred, his small hand reaching for Nia, who held him close. Ayla eased upright, her body aching from the ordeal, her eyes meeting his watchful, cautious, but not hostile. "You understand me?" he asked quietly. A pause, then a nod. "You hurt anywhere?" Another pause, and she touched her ankle, wincing, then gestured to Quay, who whimpered softly. Caleb crouched beside them, rewrapping her ankle with a clean cloth, his hands gentle, their dignity unshaken despite their vulnerability. "Names?" he asked after a long moment. "Ayla," she whispered, her accent hinting at Apache roots, nodding toward the child. "Quay, my nephew." He tapped his chest. "Caleb." They surveyed the ranch wooden walls, sparse furniture, the rifle near the door, their gazes lingering on it. "Safe here," he said, following their looks. "No one's coming." It was a hope, not a certainty, for girls like them, abandoned with a child, likely carrying a past that might follow. He stepped outside to tend his horse, needing space to process, the smoke rising steadily from the chimney a sign of life within. Inside, Ayla eased upright, her body aching from the journey, the silence striking her as unfamiliar yet comforting. Caleb's coat smelled of leather and sage, and she pulled it closer, studying the chair where he'd watched over them and Quay. When Caleb returned with water and jerky, he found them sitting up, tending to each other, their torn dresses patched with makeshift cloth. He handed out the provisions, and they ate slowly, offering pieces to Quay, their eyes steady. "Where's your family?" he asked carefully. Ayla looked away, her jaw tensing, shaking her head firmly. "Tribe?" Another pause. Then, "Number." Her voice was clear, her accent strong, and though he sensed withheld truth, he let it rest. For the rest of the day, they communicated in glances and gestures, him clearing space by the fire, them organizing their meager belongings with quiet purpose. Caleb repaired the fence, his mind on the girl's plea and the mystery of their arrival, while Ayla kept the fire alive, claiming a role with silent strength. That night, they stayed near the hearth until he climbed into bed, then settled close with Quay, their warmth, and the child's soft breaths, a new presence in his solitude. Neither spoke, but the silence had shifted, a bond forming in the wake of their shared resilience, the weight of her offer, lingering like a shadow. The Arizona plains unfurled like a relentless expanse of brittle grass and fading shadows as Caleb Stone, Ayla, Nia, Quay, and the Apache kin ventured away from Willow Creek, the pale dawn casting long, ghostly silhouettes across the prairie terrain. Caleb led the way on foot, his weathered coat dusted with prairie dust, his boots crunching through the dry earth, his lasso coiled at his hip, his rifle slung across his back. His face, rugged with a weathered jaw, bore a mixture of determination and unease, his brown eyes scanning the horizon for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Ayla, the elder girl in her mid-teens, walked beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed shawl, her wrists still marked from the ropes, her dark eyes sharp with survival. Nia, the younger girl, followed, her dress patched and torn, her hands cradling Quay, the 2-year-old boy, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery from the night's ordeal. A young Apache warrior, Tala, trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 others from the girls' tribe, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the weak light. The journey to a hidden tribal camp near Dry Mesa, a 2-day trek, was their goal. But the prairie held other trials to test their fragile alliance. Their water was scarce. The canteen they'd salvaged from Willow Creek, reduced to a few tepid drops, their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of dried berries Tala had foraged. The heat bit deep, its intensity a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the soft whimper of Quay, and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Caleb's mind churned with the previous night's events, his silent choice to save both Ayla and Nia, the girl's desperate offer, the arrival of the Apache kin with their claim of sacred law, the threat of outlaws. He'd acted to ease his own guilt, but their presence now drew danger, a price he hadn't foreseen. He offered Ayla water, a gesture of goodwill, his hand trembling slightly from the heat. Ayla accepted, her eyes narrowing. "Why risk this for us?" she asked, her voice raw but steady. Caleb met her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Lost my wife and girl to fever. Can't leave you to die like that." Ayla's expression softened, but suspicion lingered, a reflection of a life shaped by abandonment and survival. Tala and the warriors walked with a quiet dignity, their buckskin garments rustling softly, the woven pouch Nia carried catching the fading light. Tala shared their story as they moved, his voice low and resonant. "Outlaws raided our camp, stole our goods, abandoned them. Ayla and Nia fled with Quay to escape. We've tracked them since, fearing their return." Nia added, her tone firm. "Our tribe cast us out. We ran to save our nephew." "A warrior," Kono muttered. "They want our tribal secrets." Caleb's heart sank. The pouch likely held something valuable, a lure that had ruined men. But the girls' lives and Quay's safety were worth more. "I'll keep you safe," he said, his resolve firming, though doubt gnawed at him about the pouch's contents. Their progress halted at midday when they reached a trading post tucked into a shallow gully. Prairie stop, a haven for outlaws and wanderers. Caleb needed supplies, his stores depleted after the girls' rescue, but Ayla tensed. "Danger here," she warned. "Men talk." Caleb nodded, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was stifling, the stench of sweat and stale tobacco thick. A trader named Silas Reed, a wiry man with a sly grin, leaned against a crate, his eyes narrowing. "Caleb Stone," he said. "Heard you took in 2 Apache girls and a kid. Outlaws are offering a bounty." Caleb's jaw tightened, his past with Prairie rumors flashing. "Mind your own, Silas." Reed smirked, his gaze on the pouch. $200 says I tell them where you're headed." Nia's pouch flashed, striking Reed's arm, forcing him back. "Speak, and you bleed," she hissed. Caleb stepped forward, his rifle aimed. "Walk away, Silas. This ain't your fight." Reed paled, retreating, his laughter echoing. "They'll hunt you down." Caleb cursed under his breath. Reed's treachery would lead the outlaws straight to Dry Mesa. "We move now," he said. The tribe's respect grew, their trust a tentative thread. "You're brave," Kono said. Caleb shook his head, the weight of his past pressing down. "I've been a loner." The ambush came at dusk. Hoofbeats thundered through the grass, and 4 outlaws led by a scar-faced rider named Cole surrounded them near a rocky outcrop. "Hand over the girls, Stone." Cole barked, his rifle raised. Caleb fired, his shot grazing Cole's arm, sending him staggering. Ayla threw a rock, striking another's shoulder, while Tala's spear felled a third. Caleb's second shot dropped a rider, the outcrop falling silent save for the wind's moan. The 4th fled, shouting threats. "They'll burn you out." They took cover behind the rocks, bandaging minor cuts, the heat seeping into their exhaustion. Tala's eyes met Caleb's, his suspicion easing. "You fight for us," he said. Caleb wiped dust from his brow, his jaw tightening. "Ain't right, what they did. I've got regrets of my own." Nia nodded, her pain surfacing. "They killed my parents for this pouch." Caleb's breath caught. The relic was the key, a prize worth killing for. "We'll keep it safe," he said, his resolve hardening. Their bond deepened as they rested, Caleb sharing his canteen, Tala offering berries from his pouch. "What's in that pouch?" he asked. Nia held it up, its symbols glowing faintly. "It holds our sacred rites. They want them to hide their crime." Caleb's heart ached, his losses echoing theirs. "I lost my family to fever. Lived alone since." Kono's gaze softened. "We're all broken then. Maybe we heal together." The night stretched ahead, the prairie vast, but the threat of the outlaws grew. Caleb taught Ayla to use his lasso, her hands steady despite her past, their partnership a lifeline. Tala showed him Apache prairie signs, their trust a flame against the prairie's grip. "You're strong," Caleb said. Ayla smiled, a rare light in her eyes. "You too, brother." The tribe watched, their kinship deepening, a family forged in the crucible of the prairie. But the peace was fleeting. Hoofbeats returned, closer now Cole and his men, relentless as the heat. Caleb chose a defensible ridge, setting up with the tribe behind rocks. "We fight if we must," he said, his rifle ready. Tala nodded, his spear poised. Cole's men appeared, their rifles glinting. "Last chance, Stone," Cole shouted. Caleb fired, his shot dropping a rider, but an arrow grazed Tala's leg, drawing a cry. Nia shielded him, her pouch a talisman, while Kono's spear felled too, forcing the attackers to retreat. They bandaged Tala's leg, Caleb's hands gentle. "You're all my family now," he said. Tala's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. "And you're ours." The prairie tested them, its dusty trials forging a bond. But the outlaws' wrath loomed larger. A storm they'd face together. Dry Mesa was near, but so was their reckoning. The Arizona plains stretched like an unforgiving ocean of brittle grass and rolling dunes, their surface baking under the relentless glare of a midday sun that churned the air into a shimmering haze of dust and heat, the horizon wavering with mirages of desperation. Caleb Stone, Ayla, Nia, Quay, and the Apache kin led by Tala pressed onward, the wagon creaking behind Caleb's steady hands, the weary horse plodding through the dry earth with a labored gait, its breath a faint gasp in the stifling air. Caleb's weathered coat clung to his broad frame with sweat, his boots sinking into the cracked soil. His lasso coiled at his hip, his rifle slung across his back. His face, rugged with a weathered jaw, bore a determined set, his brown eyes scanning the horizon for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Ayla, the elder girl in her mid-teens, walked beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed shawl, her wrists still marked from the ropes, her dark eyes sharp with survival. Nia, the younger girl, followed, her dress patched and torn, her hands cradling Quay, the 2-year-old boy, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery from the night's ordeal. Tala trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the weak light. The hidden tribal camp near Dry Mesa, their destination, was a day's journey, but the prairie held other trials to forge their resilience. Their water was nearly gone, the canteen they'd salvaged from Prairie Stop reduced to a few tepid drops, their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of dried berries Tala had foraged. The heat beat down, its intensity a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the soft whimper of Quay, and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Caleb's mind wrestled with his past, his wife and daughter lost to fever, his years of isolation, a guilt that shadowed his every step, the presence of Ayla, Nia, and Quay, a mirror to his loneliness, stirred a compassion he'd buried, their resilience a challenge to his despair. "We need to find water soon," Caleb said, his voice hoarse from the dry air. Tala nodded, pointing to a faint depression on the prairie floor. "There's a dry wash ahead. It might hold a spring," he replied, his Apache wisdom guiding them through the wilderness. The tribe's silence, broken only by soft murmurs and the occasional rustle of supplies, hinted at their vigilance. The pouch Nia carried a burden they shared. They reached the dry wash as the sun peaked, its cracked earth a fleeting mercy against the scorching heat. Caleb checked the wagon, its wheels wobbling from the rough terrain, while Ayla and a warrior named Kono scouted for signs of life, her movements aided by a makeshift crutch. The wash offered a shallow pool, its water brackish but drinkable, a rare oasis in the prairie's grip. Caleb filled the canteen, offering it to Kono first, his hands trembling from the heat. "Drink, friend," he said, the word warm with care. Kono accepted, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Caleb," he murmured, a rare nod breaking through his stoic demeanor. The moment was brief, but it deepened their bond, a thread of trust weaving through their shared struggle. The prairie's trial struck at noon. A dust storm brewed on the horizon, a roiling wall of red dust that swallowed the sky, its roar a test of their endurance. "Get down," Caleb shouted, pulling Ayla, Quay, and the wagon behind a dune, the warriors and horse crowding in. The storm hit like a living entity, its force tearing at their clothes, dust clogging their throats and stinging their eyes. Caleb shielded Quay with his body, Ayla and Nia huddling close, the tempest raging for hours, leaving them buried in drifts, their water spilled into the sand. As it passed, the prairie revealed a new peril, an outlaw trap, a snare concealed by dust, its metal jaws glinting near Ayla's crutch. Caleb reacted instantly, yanking her back, the trap snapping shut inches from her. Tala's quick thinking with his spear dislodged the mechanism, saving them. Good save, Caleb said, his respect for them growing. Ayla nodded, her gaze steady. The prairie tests our spirit, she replied. That night they camped in the wash's lee. A small fire, their only warmth, its glow casting shadows on the sandy walls. The storm had delayed them, the camp still a day away, and Caleb's mind churned with guilt, his family's loss, his years of isolation. Now this family's fight. Nia offered him a berry, her hands gentle. You fight for us, she said. Why? Caleb poked the fire, his face shadowed. I turned away from help once my wife and girl paid for it. Can't do that again. Quay's eyes, though weak, softened, his small voice whispering. Papa? A word that pierced Caleb's heart. The confession hung heavy, a mirror to Caleb's regrets. Strength ain't just in surviving, he said. It's in standing together. Ayla leaned against him, her voice small. This pouch holds our rights. They want them to erase our truth. Caleb's heart ached, his losses echoing hers. I lost my family to fever. Lived alone since. Kono's gaze met his, a warmth breaking through. We're all lost then. Maybe we find kin. Their talk was interrupted by a rustle. Apache figures emerged from the dusk, led by a stout woman with a painted face. I am Mara, Tala's sister, she said, her voice cautious. We saw the storm. Outlaws hunt you. She offered a water skin, her eyes on Ayla and Nia. You're alive, sisters. We thought you lost. Ayla ran to her, tears in her eyes. Caleb saved us. Mara nodded, offering Caleb a feathered cord. You're kin now, rancher. The reunion was brief but heartfelt. Mara's warriors, 15 strong, joined them, their spears glinting. The tracker Cole is near, Mara warned. He plans an attack at dawn. Caleb's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield. We'll be ready, he said. Quay's hand found his trust a beacon. Father, he murmured. The word warmed Caleb, a redemption he hadn't sought. The peace shattered as the first light crept over the horizon. Hoofbeats echoed Cole and 12 riders, their rifles ready, their intent clear in the pre-dawn gloom. Mara's men melted into the sand dunes, leaving Caleb and the tribe exposed on the ridge. Hold, Mara whispered, but Caleb stood firm, his rifle raised, the weight of the warning settling in. Cole's voice cut through the heat. Give up the girls, Stone, or die. Caleb fired, his shot grazing a rider, but an arrow struck Mara's arm, drawing a cry. Nia shielded her, her pouch a talisman, while Tala's spear felled too, forcing Cole to retreat momentarily. They bandaged Mara's arm, Caleb's hands gentle. You're all my family now, he said. Mara's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The prairie tested them, its dusty trials forging a bond. But the outlaws' attack loomed larger, a storm they'd face together. Dry Mesa was near, but so was their reckoning. Dry Mesa rose like a parched scar across the Arizona plains, its treacherous pass of cracked earth and weathered outcrops, standing defiant against the encroaching dusk. The sun dipped low, casting a fiery glow across the mesa's rim, the air thick with the scent of sun-scorched grass, and the faint promise of a cooling night breeze following the day's relentless heat. Caleb Stone, Ayla, Nia, Quay, and the Apache kin, led by Tala, prepared for their stand, the tension palpable in the stillness, heightened by the looming threat of the outlaws' attack. Caleb's weathered coat was torn at the hem, his boots caked with dust and blood from his grazed shoulder, his lasso and rifle poised despite the ache in his muscles. His face, rugged with a weathered jaw, bore a grim determination, his brown eyes shadowed by the weight of his past solitude. Ayla, the elder girl in her mid-teens, stood beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed shawl, her arm wound bandaged, her dark eyes resolute with survival. Nia, the younger girl, flanked her, her dress patched and torn, her hands cradling Quay. the 2-year-old boy, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of courage. Tala trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his leg wound bandaged, his hands wielding a spear, his presence a steady guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their weapons and horses poised for battle. The journey to this refuge had forged their bond, now tested by the outlaws' relentless pursuit. The mesa offered strategic ground, steep slopes for ambushes, rocky outcrops for cover, and a narrow pass for traps. Caleb fortified a vantage point with Tala's men, his hands calloused from years of ranching, now skilled in war. Ayla rigged tripwires with sinew, her movements precise despite her exhaustion, her pouch a constant reminder of their burden. The warriors assisted, stacking stones with Kono, their vigilance unwavering. "The outlaws want the pouch," Tala said, his voice low and strained. "They'll kill us for it." Caleb nodded, his guilt over past isolation fueling his resolve. "We hold them here," he replied. Kono handed him a sharpened stake, a silent pledge of unity, the weapon's weight a comfort in his hands. Mara distributed spears and arrows, her warriors blending into the mesa's shadows, their movements silent and deadly. "Cole leads them," she warned. "The attack is imminent." Caleb's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield against the encroaching dark. "We fight as family," he said. Quay's small hand found his, a flicker of trust breaking through his fear. "Father," he murmured, a word that warmed Caleb's soul. The sentiment lingered, a redemption he hadn't dared hope for, as the wind carried the distant sound of approaching hooves. The conflict, now a reality. As dusk deepened, the air grew taut with anticipation, the mesa's silence broken by the crunch of boots on gravel. The outlaws rode in with 15 men, Cole at their side, the tracker's scar-faced grin, a harbinger of violence. Their leader, a broad man in a black duster lined with stolen pelts, dismounted and called out, his voice a thunderclap against the plains. "Stone, hand over the girls and that pouch, or this mesa becomes your grave." Caleb stepped forward, his rifle raised, his voice firm despite the heat. "You'll have to take them over my dead body," he shouted, his breath visible in the cooling air. The clash erupted like a prairie tempest. The outlaws charged, their rifles and revolvers spitting fire through the dusk. Caleb's first shot dropped a rider, the bullet finding its mark with a precision honed by survival. Tala's warriors struck from the shadows, their spears felling 2 more, their movements silent and deadly. Ayla triggered a tripwire, a dynamite cache salvaged from an old trader's stash exploding and sending a shower of dust and rock, scattering the attackers. But the outlaws' numbers were overwhelming, and Cole's rifle was a relentless predator, his bullet grazing Caleb's arm, drawing a sharp hiss of pain. Mara pulled him behind a rock, her arm wound, seeping anew. "Stay alive," she growled, loosing an arrow that struck a man's chest, her aim unwavering despite her fatigue. The mesa became a battlefield, its echoes ringing with gunfire and the thud of falling bodies. Caleb fired again, dropping another rider, the heat numbing his hands but not his resolve. Tala's warriors fought with primal fury, their spears piercing the fray, while Kono and the warriors lobbed rocks, their forms a surprising force against the rugged terrain. But the outlaw leader's voice cut through the chaos. "Nia, give me the pouch's secret, or they all die." He held a pistol to Tala's head, the warrior's spear shattered, his eyes defiant. Nia's heart sank, her pouch clutched tight. "No," she cried, her voice raw with emotion. Caleb's mind raced, he couldn't lose another family. He signaled Tala's men to hold, his gaze locking with Nia's. "Excuse," a silent plea for a plan. Nia stepped forward, her stance defiant despite her wounds. "They betrayed our tribe," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "They killed our family, abandoned us to die." The revelation hit Caleb like a thunderclap. The outlaws' greed wasn't just for the pouch, but to silence the girls who knew of their family's demise, a dark secret her tribe had suffered. The leader laughed, his pistol steady. "Then you all die with your defiance." But Nia moved, shoving Caleb, Ayla, Quay, and Rose aside as Cole fired, the bullet tearing through her chest. She fell, blood staining the dust, her pouch slipping from her grasp. "Caleb, no!" he roared, lunging to Nia's side, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. Tala's warriors charged, their spears a blur, felling 3 men in a surge of vengeance. Kono struck with a rock, stunning a rider, while Mara's arrow found another's leg. Caleb tackled Cole, their struggle a tangle of fists and sand, until his lasso coiled around the tracker's neck, ending the threat. The outlaw leader roared, charging with his pistol, but Tala's spear pierced his side, bringing him down. The remaining outlaws fled, their horses vanishing into the dusk. Caleb knelt beside Nia, his hands stained with her blood, his heart breaking as he tried to stem the flow. "Hold on," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes met his, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "You're my brother now," she rasped. "Protect them. The pouch is our truth." Her hand fell, her spirit slipping into the prairie's embrace, her sacrifice a final act of trust. Mara bound the leader, her men finishing the fight, the mesa falling silent save for the wind's mournful wail. The outlaws were defeated, their men scattered, but Nia's loss was a wound deeper than the heat. Caleb cradled her, tears mixing with the dust on his face, the weight of her words sinking in. Kwe, Ayla, Tala, and the warriors approached, placing the pouch, a woven mat, and herbs on her chest. "She was our sister," Kwe said, his small voice thick. "Now she's with our ancestors." The Apache carried her to a pyre, their chants rising, a tribute to her courage that echoed through the mesa. Caleb stood, his guilt eased by her forgiveness, his promise to protect Kwe and the others a new purpose. The mesa smoldered, the air heavy with loss and victory. Mara offered Caleb a place with the tribe, and he nodded. "I'll honor her at the camp," he said, his voice steady. The journey to Dry Mesa had broken the outlaw's grip, but Nia's sacrifice would resonate in the prairie's silence. Caleb's redemption was hers, and the pouch, her people's truth, would remain guarded. The dawn broke over Dry Mesa, a fragile light spilling across the windswept plains, where the embers of Nia's pyre glowed like the last whispers of a fading hope. The air was thick with the lingering scent of smoke and the dry, earthy aroma of the prairie, the vast Arizona landscape reclaiming the battlefield with a quiet, unyielding peace. Caleb Stone stood at the mesa's edge, his weathered coat torn and dusted with ash, his boots planted firmly in the cracked earth, his lasso and rifle resting against a boulder. His face, rugged with a weathered jaw, bore the weight of grief, his brown eyes glistening with unshed tears, the guilt of his past solitude softened by Nia's final words. The woven pouch with the tribal secrets, Nia's strange reward, hung around his neck on a cord, a symbol of the kinship that had brought him to this moment. The outlaw leader, bound and defeated, slumped against a rock, his claim to power shattered, his greed no match for the courage of a rancher and his adopted tribe. Kwe, the 2-year-old boy, clung to Caleb's leg, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face reflecting a mix of sorrow and newfound strength. Ayla, the elder girl, stood nearby, her face etched with both loss and pride, the hope of their legacy burning bright. Tala, Mara, Kono, and the Apache warriors gathered around, their painted faces mirroring the resilience of the prairie. The Apache warriors, led by Tala, moved with a solemn reverence, their faces reflecting the mesa's rugged hues as they gathered around Nia's pyre. The flames had dwindled to a gentle glow, the earth around it darkened by melted wax and ash, a testament to her sacrifice. Tala knelt, offering a prayer in Apache, his voice a deep chant that reverberated through the plains, honoring a sister who had transcended her role as protector and mother. Caleb watched, his hands trembling as he placed Nia's shawl once her shield onto the pyre, a silent vow to carry her legacy forward. Kwe, Ayla, and the warriors joined him, adding the pouch, a woven mat, and a bundle of herbs, their offerings a tribute to her courage. "She saved us," Kwe said, his small voice thick with emotion. "You kept her promise." Caleb nodded, the words a balm to his wounded soul, a redemption he hadn't dared to claim. The journey to the hidden tribal valley began, the warriors carrying the pyre's remnants through the mesa's dusty trail, its ashes a sacred burden. The path was treacherous, the ground shifting underfoot, the heat of the day giving way to a cooling breeze that carried the promise of renewal. Caleb walked with them, his arm aching from the graze but his spirit lifted by their unity. The valley emerged a sheltered expanse nestled between rolling hills, its floor dotted with wildflowers and a faint shimmer of a spring fed by an underground stream. The Apache survivors greeted them, their faces etched with grief for Nia but warmth for her savior. Mara led Caleb to the spring, its waters clear and life-giving, reflecting the cavern walls adorned with painted symbols and woven mats, a sanctuary Nia had died to protect. Her spirit guards this place, Mara said. You are kin. The tribe gathered around a fire that night, the valley's walls amplifying their voices as they shared tales of Nia's bravery. Her gifts to Caleb, her trust, the pouch were now symbols of her legacy, their weight heavier than the sacred rites they held. They offered him a place among them, their eyes reflecting gratitude and hope. You fought for her, Kono said, handing him a woven mat. Stay, and find peace. Caleb hesitated, his mind drifting to his past, a rancher broken by fever and loss. His wife and daughter's deaths, a guilt he'd carried like a stone. Nia's words, "You're my brother," echoed, her sacrifice a key to unlock that prison. I'll stay, he said finally, but I'll bring my skills to your valley. With your help. The days that followed were a blend of mourning and rebuilding. The Apache taught Caleb their ways, how to channel the spring's water for crops, how to weave mats from prairie grasses, how to honor their rites with herbs by the fire. Quay became his shadow, the boy's small hands learning alongside Caleb's, to his laughter, a rare sound that softened the edges of his grief. Ayla, guided by Tala, took to organizing the valley's defenses, her resilience turning into leadership. They constructed a small adobe home near the spring, its walls rising under their hands, a fusion of Apache strength and Caleb's ranching skills. The prairie, once a place of solitude, became a bridge between worlds, its silence broken by the tribe's songs and the trickle of water, a stark contrast to the hollow quiet he'd known. One evening, as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple, Caleb stood at the spring's edge, the woven pouch a constant reminder. Quay and the tribal children joined him, holding a new pouch and a carved lasso crafted by the tribe. For us? Quay asked. Caleb nodded, his eyes misting as he handed them out. Your aunt would want you to have them, he said. Quay smiled, a rare light in his young face. She gave us a home. The sentiment lingered, a bond forged in the crucible of the prairie, strengthened by the promise of a unified legacy. The tribe celebrated with a feast, their songs filling the valley, Nia's name woven into the melodies. Caleb learned her story in full, how she'd fled her tribe's abandonment to protect Quay, how she'd hidden the pouch to preserve the truth of their family's demise, how her spirit now watched over them. His past, his failure to save his family, his years of isolation faded against her forgiveness. He wasn't just a rancher anymore, but a guardian, a father to those he'd once failed. Tala approached, offering a carved wooden flute. Lead with her strength, she said. Caleb took it, his hands steady. I will. Weeks later, the valley thrived, its spring nourishing new crops, its people strengthened by Caleb's aid. The tribe, true to their bond, began the journey back to Willow Creek, bringing materials and hands to rebuild Caleb's ranch, transforming the ruins into a symbol of renewal. He rebuilt his life, the tribe's help a lifeline, their stories a balm to his loneliness. Nia's shawl hung above the new home's door, a shrine to her sacrifice, its fabric a silent witness. The prairie stretched vast, its sun-scorched plains a testament to their fight, but it was no longer a place of solitude. Caleb's redemption was complete, not in land, but in the family he'd found: Quay, Ayla, Tala, Mara, Kono, the tribe all bound by Nia's legacy. As the sun rose over Dry Mesa, its golden light bathed the valley and the distant silhouette of the reborn ranch, a promise of a new beginning. Caleb stood at the home's threshold, the wooden flute at his side, the woven pouch gleaming. He was no longer just a silent rancher who'd taken both, but a father to a boy and a brother to a sister, whose aunt's courage had saved him, whose pouch had turned despair into a legacy of hope. The prairie whispered her name, and Caleb carried it forward, a unified legacy born from the ashes of sacrifice, with the promise of a rebuilt home anchoring their new family.